Welcome to a deep dive. And this time we're going deep into the psychology of money.
Oh, yeah?
We're talking Morgan Housel's The Psychology of Money,
Okay.
digging into all those fascinating and sometimes kind of strange ways our minds,
Yeah.
can mess with our financial decisions.
Oh, absolutely. It's like there's this hidden force field, right? It's messing with even our best laid financial plans.
You're telling me, it's like, why is it that some financial, masterminds end up going bankrupt?
Right.
While other people who, live seemingly ordinary lives, they quietly build these incredible fortunes. What's the secret?
Well, Housel would say it's less about, having some secret formula and more about something a lot more interesting, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Just temperament, long-term habits, those sorts of things.
Right.
He introduces these two figures that highlight this really well.
Okay, give me the rundown.
So first you've got Ronald Reed. This guy was a janitor in Vermont, lived a super frugal life. Like, we're talking patching his own clothes, driving a used car for years, chopping his own firewood, kind of frugal.
Okay, I am picturing this guy. This is like almost like a character from a movie or something.
Yeah, totally.
All right, so what's the twist?
So the twist is, when he died back in 2014, he left behind an $8 million portfolio. Yeah. Turns out, beneath that everyday, exterior was this disciplined investor. Decades of patient investing.
Yeah.
Just quietly building his fortune.
Wow. Talk about an unexpected millionaire next door.
I know, right?
All right, so who's our counterpoint to Mr. Frugal Janitor?
Okay, so on the flip side, we've got Richard Fuscone. So picture this. Harvard MBA, Wall Street hotshot, multi-million-dollar mansion, like the whole 9 yards.
Okay, but I'm sensing a but coming here.
Oh, yeah, big time. So by 2010, files for bankruptcy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So these stories, though, they really get at what Housel's arguing, which is that it's not really about fleeting brilliance,
right,
or even, I guess, necessarily how much money you make.
Yeah.
It's about your temperament, your patience, thinking long-term, mastering those soft skills.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's like the tortoise and the hare, but with, like investment portfolios instead.
Yes, exactly. And speaking of psychology, one of the things that just blew me away about this book is how Housel connects your personal experiences to how you view things financially.
Yeah.
We're all walking around with this invisible baggage.
Right.
That shapes how we see risk, how we see reward, even what we consider like enough.
Absolutely. Your upbringing, the economic climate you come of age in, even just when you were born, like it all leaves an imprint on how you view money. It's like someone who lived through like the hyperinflation of the 70s. They're going to have a very different perspective on money than someone, who came of age, like investing during the dot-com boom.
Totally. It makes you wonder, like, if you were to rewind and really think about those early financial memories, those formative experiences that you had with money, maybe that could give you some insight into your own, like, financial habits today.
Oh, without a doubt, yeah. Recognizing those, like, deep ingrained biases, that's like the first step to understanding why you make the financial decisions that you do.
Now, speaking of understanding, let's talk about this whole compounding thing. I feel like I get the concept, but Housel really breaks down why it's so powerful, but also how a lot of us underestimate it.
Totally. He compares it to like a snowball effect, like small actions, but over time they accumulate into something massive.
Right. And it makes you think about how we view, small, everyday financial decisions. What if instead of looking at it as, I'm just saving a few dollars, what if you look at that as like, that's the starting point of a snowball. That's already in motion.
Totally, yeah.
That's kind of empowering, right?
It is. And he backs up this like snowball analogy with like real world examples that are kind of mind blowing.
Yeah.
Like think about hard drive storage. Like in just a few decades, we've gone from, a few megabytes to terabytes.
Right.
That's a million-fold increase.
It's crazy.
I know. Or think about Warren Buffett.
Right.
Most people don't realize this, but most of his wealth, that was accumulated after he turned 60.
Wow.
All thanks to compounding.
It really highlights that patience isn't just some virtue. It's like powerful financially, right?
Yeah, sure.
Like in our world of instant gratification, it's so easy to get, swept up in the get rich quick mentality. But, Housel reminds us that a lot of times real wealth comes from playing the long game, right? Let that compounding work its magic. It really makes you rethink, all those get-rich-quick schemes. You know what else really struck me, though?
What's that?
It's how Housel talks about this idea of enough.
Yeah.
Like, we're constantly chasing this idea of,
of having enough.
Having enough. And then we get there, right? And the goalposts, they just move.
Yeah, they always move. Yeah, it's like we think, oh, if I can just get to this number, then I'll be happy. I'll be content. But then you get there and it's, well, actually, I need this much.
And it's like trying to, I don't know, catch a moonbeam or something.
Exactly. Yeah.
He tells this great anecdote about this. John Bogle, the founder of Vanguard, is at some dinner party, right? Hosted by this billionaire.
Okay.
And Kurt Vonnegut, the author, he turns to his friend. He's like, our host here probably made more money today than you'll ever make from Catch-22.
Yeah.
I know, right?
Like, what do you even say to that?
I know. And his friend Joseph Heller, he's like, yeah, but I have something he'll never have. Enough.
Oh, wow. That's a good one.
Isn't that great?
Yeah. It's such a good reminder, though, that, real wealth isn't just about your bank account. It's about being content with what you have.
Which is way easier said than done.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Especially, today, right? With, all the messages we're bombarded with about, what you should have, what you need to buy to be happy, all that.
Absolutely. And that's when things can get kind of dangerous, right?
Right. Yeah.
Like the Housel balance is this whole enough discussion with some cautionary tales.
Right.
That show, how this pursuit of more can lead to some, disastrous outcomes.
Yeah, like that story of Rajat Gupta, right? Who was a former Goldman Sachs director.
Yeah.
Gets caught up in insider trading.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a guy who's worth hundreds of millions of dollars.
I know.
But it still wasn't enough.
It's wild, yeah. And then there's, the classic example, Bernie Madoff.
Oh, right.
And his whole Ponzi scheme.
Yeah.
That just shows how greed can just spiral out of control.
It really makes you stop and think. Okay, so we've talked about the psychology of, earning wealth, accumulating wealth. But then Housel gets into, staying wealthy.
Right.
And some of this was, I found this kind of counterintuitive.
Oh, yeah.
Like what?
Well, he emphasizes these three things, right? Frugality, okay, I get that.
Right.
Paranoia, and what he calls a survival mentality.
Okay.
Break that down for me. I'm not sure I follow.
Okay, so it's not necessarily clinical paranoia.
Right.
But it's more about a healthy awareness of risk.
Okay.
Right? He uses Jesse Livermore as an example.
Okay.
So this guy, legendary trader, made and lost fortunes multiple times over.
Wow.
Super, super smart, obviously.
But just lacked the discipline to manage risk.
Yeah.
And so he could never actually hold on to his wealth.
So it's like that saying, don't mistake brains for a bull market.
Exactly. Yeah. You can be you can have amazing instincts for making money, but if you don't know how to manage risk,
right,
you're going to lose it all eventually.
And so that's where the whole survival mentality comes in.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
He contrasts Livermore with Rose and Moritz Blumkin. They're the founders of the Nebraska Furniture Mart.
Okay.
And their whole thing was they were just terrified of going out of business.
Oh, wow.
So that fear kept them really focused on building a sustainable business.
So it's they always had that what if scenario playing out in their minds.
Exactly. They maintained a margin of safety.
Which, Housel talks a lot about margin of safety, right? What's his takeaway there?
So he argues that, it's not just about having a financial cushion,
right?
Like emergency savings or a diversified portfolio.
Yeah.
But it's also about an emotional buffer.
Oh, interesting. So the ability to kind of weather the storms?
Exactly. To weather the inevitable downturns.
Because they're going to happen.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
They're always going to happen. That's the thing. And so it's do you have that mental fortitude to stay the course when things get rough? That
actually reminds me of another point he makes, which is that we should embrace mistakes.
Oh, yeah.
Embrace setbacks.
He's all about that.
Yeah. Reframe failure as a learning opportunity.
Yeah. Don't dwell on what went wrong. Just take the lesson and move on to the next thing.
I love that because it's so easy to get bogged down by those oops moments.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But what if you just viewed them as data?
Right.
This is just information.
This is how you learn. This is how you grow.
It's all about adapting.
Totally. Yeah. And this kind of ties into what he calls cultivating a barbelled personality.
Okay, now that sounds interesting.
I know. So imagine a barbell.
Yeah.
With weights on each end.
Okay.
On one side, you've got optimism, believing in the future, believing in growth.
Okay.
And then on the other side, you have that healthy dose of paranoia.
Oh, interesting.
So you're kind of balancing those two things.
So like long-term optimism,
Yeah.
but like also being aware of what could go wrong.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like a hedging strategy, but for your mind.
Right, right.
And he would say that that's what lets you like actually stay in the game long enough to reap the benefits of like long-term investing.
It's riding out those dips without, freaking out.
Exactly, yeah.
It's like so much of this comes down to mindset, right?
Totally, yeah.
And speaking of mindset, I found it interesting how Housel cautions against like relying too much on past data,
Oh, yeah.
historical data, because like, isn't that, I don't know, I thought past performance was supposed to be like the gold standard.
That's what we're always told, but Housel, he makes the argument that, like, yeah, it sounds good in theory, but in practice in today's world, that might not really be the best way to go.
Because things are changing so fast. Yeah. He points out, like so much of our, I don't know how to say it, like our modern financial system, 401ks, Roth IRAs, all the venture capital stuff, that's all relatively new, right? So to use data from like way back when those things didn't even exist, it doesn't really give you an accurate picture.
It's like trying to, I don't know, navigate a city using like a map from the 1800s or something.
Right.
It's not gonna work that well.
Right. And it speaks to this whole idea of adaptability, which I think that's like the key takeaway for me from this book.
You have to be able to adapt.
Yeah.
Like those investors who, maybe they were following the same strategies that had worked for them for decades, but then, dot-com bubble or like 2008 happened.
Right. And it all goes out the window.
Yeah, they weren't able to adapt.
It reminds me of, like, you hear about those tech entrepreneurs who are constantly having to adapt and iterate.
To pivot.
Yeah, pivot. Like, that's what you got to do in the markets, too. Okay, ready for another, like, curveball.
Hit me.
So Housel, he gets into this whole thing about the allure of pessimism.
Okay.
Like, as humans, we're just drawn to bad news.
We are.
More than good news.
It's true. Because, like, bad news is more dramatic. It's more attention-grabbing.
Exactly. It's like our brains are just wired to look for threats.
Right.
So we see those headlines, and we can't help but, like, to focus on them.
Right. And I think, especially with, like, the 24-hour news cycle.
Oh, yeah, it's everywhere.
It's very easy to get caught up in that, right? Like, that negativity bias.
It can, like, completely distort your worldview.
Yeah.
Like, he uses the example of 2008, the financial crisis.
Right.
Remember, like, all the predictions about, like, the global economy was going to, like, totally implode.
Yeah.
And, yeah, it was bad. It was definitely bad.
It was a scary time.
But it wasn't as bad as a lot of people were saying.
Right.
It just goes to show, like, those narratives, they can be really powerful.
So if we're like wired for these stories, right?
Yeah.
How do we make sure that, those stories aren't like leading us astray?
That's the $1 million question, right?
Yeah.
I think it starts with awareness.
Okay.
Like just being aware of the stories that we're telling ourselves about money and also the stories that we're being told by, the media, by other people.
Right.
And just being willing to question them.
Be a little skeptical.
Exactly. Like, is this really true? Or am I just letting my emotions get the best of me?
Right. It's so easy to, get caught up in the hype, the fear, whatever is like the hot new investment trend.
Totally.
But if you don't really like understand your own goals, your own risk tolerance, you're probably going to end up making some decisions you regret.
100%. Yeah. So, as we wrap up here.
Yeah.
Our deep dive on the psychology of money.
I feel like this is a good place to end it,
Yeah, it's been a fascinating conversation.
I've learned a lot. I hope our listeners have too.
Yeah, me too. And if you really want to go deep on this stuff, I highly recommend checking out Housel's book.
Yes, The Psychology of Money.
It's one of those books that can really change the way you think about money. Not just like what you do with it, but just your whole like mindset around money.
Yeah. Until next time, everybody keep learning, keep questioning, and just be mindful out there.
Couldn't have said it better myself.